operates within a limited business window, right? Logistics, essentially. It's mostly a movement of goods, which is only possible during the business hours. And therefore, the problem of utilization becomes even more accentuated, right? It needs to be addressed even more efficiently, right? And given we are in intra-city logistics, generally when we talk about transportation, people relate more to one city to another kind of a transportation. Why? Because intra-city you do not find any organized player, and therefore the understanding is typically that this just happens, right? How it happens, what is the mechanics of it, generally doesn't come to the forefront. We are trying to revolutionize this. We are trying to better the utilization levels, and that too, in order to get customers, we have to ensure that we are bringing cost efficiency for the customers, cost efficiency for the customers, better earning for the driver partners, and thereby making some money for ourselves. In this strained economy, how do you bring in efficiency? Efficiency means value addition, right? It can only be brought in if you are able to better matchmake and ensure that the customers get a lower cost of transportation and partners earn better. For this, you need to have that matchmaking engine which provides you with lots of data, right? Which gives you the sense as to which way the goods are moving from one corner of the city to another, right? This way, you are able to ensure that the partners are always optimally utilized, right? And therefore, they will not charge high for a one trip which they would otherwise do if they would try to transport something from one nook and corner of the city to another place. Otherwise, they were coming back idle, right? Now, when we have this information, when we are armed with this information, we are able to reduce the ratio of idle run versus built run, and this brings in efficiency for everyone. So this is something that we are doing. I'm taking a cue from what Clinton was talking about. During COVID, what had happened was that this supply chain had broken for the entire economy, right? It was something which no one had ever seen. There was suddenly no movement of people, goods, anything, right? There were consumers who wanted to consume goods, and then there were companies who wanted to sell those goods, but it couldn't have been moved. Government, slowly realized, and then of course, then there were people who thought that okay, let us stock goods for the next 7 days, 15 days, 30 days, right? And they will ensure that okay, for the next 15, 20 days, my consumption is ensured. This further aggravated the problem, right? And then the government realized that okay, they have to allow the movement of essential goods. What they didn't realize that if the goods need to be moved, right, there has to be enough packages which were classified as non-essential items. So we faced this situation when we were working directly with companies and distribution companies essentially, who needed the packages, the wooden boxes, the cartons, which could actually pack these goods and transport it to the end consumers. Then gradually the government allowed the movement of packaging items, and then they realized that there was very little difference between what is essential and what is non-essential. Eventually the entire space opened up. Eventually the entire movement was allowed, and because we were a low-touch medium, right? No one was required to go out to a Naka and hail for a truck, right? The guys I needed, right? This ensured that the press of a tap on our app, you can get the vehicle at your godown warehouse, right? Load the goods and transport it to wherever whosoever has been operated. Without taking names, we are working with a very large distribution company, a listed modern trade company, right? Who are generally working only on credit terms, right? They understood our situation that we can't afford block our working capital in order to service them. And we were working to get orders for our drivers. COVID effectively brought in a lot of human touch also in the entire ecosystem at that point. We channeled our efforts because we were not getting enough orders. Our order levels were down to 5% or 7% in the month of April, first month of lockdown. We channeled our, and we had the employees, we had to utilize them, right? We channeled our efforts that okay, chalo, dunia ka gala rakha hai, right? The partners, driver partners who are associated with us, their earnings, they are kind of daily wage earners, right? They have to operate in order to earn. Right? What we did was, okay, we work with the larger enterprises, right? We generally Coder as a company is focusing on SMEs and MSMEs. They are the right target audience, or the ad hoc demand, right? Who do not have a predictable demand and certainly want vehicles. We are working with those companies to supply who needed vehicles, so as to ensure that the driver partners are able to earn their livelihood during that time. And these companies were willing to work with us on advanced payment terms, which you would not find in normal scenario. We were working with municipalities during COVID times and all, right? Who were trying to ensure that all the relief material, right, all the medicines, or any similar stuff which needed to be transported to the right place are actually transported, because we were the only facility then available which was a low touch facility. And these are the things which came up to the fore during COVID, right? And some of the fence-sitting customers who were not, very much convinced, or there was some inertia, reluctance to move to a new unit, right? We added a lot of customers, and that is the positivity that I was talking about to you earlier. And suddenly, we saw a lot of growth which started to come, and that is how a lot of people realize that okay, if you want a vehicle, right, and you do not really have the visibility as to whether you get one or not, why not go to a platform which has an assortment of vehicles starting right from 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, 4-wheelers, right, which can transport anything and everything within the city limits, right? Why not go to a platform like service provider who can provide this? And this is how I think we are contributing to the society or the street.
Wonderful, Pankaj. I think lots of insights there, and we definitely need probably another 0 ahead of 45 minutes to get so much of information digested and brainstormed and deliberated. But with the constraint of time, I think we thank you for sharing that information and insight. And the fact that you touched upon human touch, right? I think that has been a big move. Otherwise, we were actually rushing fast towards annihilation in that sense. As a human race, because everybody is aggressive. Everybody, see the amount of road rage. So anyways, that's a separate topic. Bhadresh, you've been with Volvo Aisha for over 2 decades now, and Pithampur is where your journey started. Post Bhopal, where you did your engineering from NIT. What was your experience being part of Volvo Aisha during these 2 years, in terms of the rising commodity prices hitting you hard, and what kind of supply chain constraints did you have to deal with, which were different from probably what Porter and Nandan's company would have dealt with?
Good afternoon. So with this COVID, if you see the first wave, when it used to be data only, when we used to see in our mobile or news, and second wave it become name, people from your team who are suffering. So the life has changed a lot during this COVID, and there are a lot of things which bad has happened. Something which has good also has come out of this COVID. Basically, one thing is that this purchasing team has got a say in management meetings. Prior to that, when you talk of sourcing, it is basically cost, inventory, what innovation you are doing. But now after this COVID, they understood that what type of role we are handling, what type of disruptions are there. And now if you see lot of words like inventory, just in time, all these things are no more, you can say that levels. Now people are pointing to what called strategic inventory. You have to keep some inventory because you cannot work on just in time every time. Because anything happens, you come to know that there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, and then you come to know that one gas neon is 70% production is happening in Ukraine, and now you are going to suffer, and supply of semiconductor is going to affect. So all these things is very important now, that you have to have some inventories. And now if you see what has changed, there is a change in a relationship between an OEM and a supplier. Now trust and transparency, it has become very important in the relationship between OEM and supplier. Trust is important because whenever you give schedules, you put some snowball effect, and then supplier also put some snowball effect, and then there is a abnormal demand come from some particular commodity in the market. And transparency is required because you have to see, you have to have visibility of complete supply chain. You should know, you cannot go to the last supplier of that supply chain, but at least you should have a visibility that from where my tier 1 supplier and who is the tier 2 suppliers and who are the tier 3 suppliers, and you have to have now a complete team in your supply chain who is taking care of the risk mitigation or risk assessment of the supplier. Now this function is earlier we used to do an nemawashi of this function, but now this function has become very critical for us. Because during this COVID, we have seen that a lot of suppliers have gone through a financial distress. And because of so much of attrition and so much of labor exodus, and people are not able to maintain the quality also. Because right now we are facing the issues of quality, because of non-availability of skilled labor. So all these things has come up. So, and for one is inventory. Now we are working on some strategic inventory concept. Now the relationship with the supplier is on transparency and trust. And then it comes to the cost. When you talk of cost, earlier our approach of cost was doing negotiation, tabletop negotiation. But now it is a partnership approach in cost reduction. We are working with suppliers. We are working with our now major motive is to eliminate waste from the entire supply chain and work with them. And we have a program which we have started recently where we are calling it a partnership value proposition, where we are sharing the advantages with the supplier, and we are working with the supplier and finding out the value engineering ideas, and then we are working with them to implement those ideas rather than going to a tabletop negotiation and asking some year-on-year productivity reduction. Now we are working on a collaborative base. Collaboration is going to be a major, you can say, a factor to our success. And then it is then you can say it is the manpower, skill building. Skill building another thing which is now required. I was just talking to some of my colleagues in Volvo. For them, handling such a type of inflation is a very big thing. Because in India, at least prior to this inflation of double digit, we are handling 3%, 4%. This type of inflation was already there. But for European countries, this inflation was itself a very huge shock for them. So they have their complete purchase team has gone under a training with their HR team, so how to deal with the supplier empathically. So because right now when you got an increase letter, it is not in single digits. Many a times your figures goes out of your calculator. So you don't know how to deal with that type of inflation. When you sit in a management meeting, everyone see you as a villain. Your marketing people will ask you, so this quarter mein kitna inflation la raha hai? Rather than earlier we used to talk how much cost reduction you will do. So now they are seeing how much inflation we are making. So every quarter we are coming up 5%, 4%, 7%, and at the end of the year it is double-digit inflation. So this is something we are also working with our team how to deal with the suppliers, which type of inflation we can pass on. Where we'll ask our supplier to collaborate with us at least till this commodity cool down, and then we can see that whether we can consider this request or not. So these are the major things which we are seeing differences between pre-COVID and post-COVID.
So just an additional question to that, Badrish, for you. You mentioned collaboration, you mentioned transparency, trust, a partnership with your suppliers. Was this a result of COVID which actually compelled you to do that, or was it inherently an iShare DNA?
It is there in a DNA, but the rigor has gone up after this COVID. Because we understood that whenever, like see, when COVID production has gone down to 400 vehicles, 300 vehicles a month. After the first wave in October 21, after that the ramp up has started. Then we understood the value of collaboration with my suppliers, supporting those suppliers in terms of financial or technically or some other way. Working with them, we are able to recover very fast in the market, which has helped us in gaining the market share also. So working collaboratively with the supplier is something, the rigor of this exercise has gone up after this COVID, you can say.
So COVID is the catalyst.
It has
sort of, yeah. So thanks a lot, Badrish. In fact, Badrish and we were chatting up a couple of hours back, and I did share with him that when in the initial years, the first 5-6 years of my career was when I was in Pithampur working on an outsourced project for inbound to manufacturing with a company that I can now name because they're pretty much non-existent at this point of time. It was called Hindustan Motors those days. And the first project of collaboration for inbound to manufacturing and outsourcing, of course, needs working together, partnership and trust and transparency. I shared with him that we had a lot of strike situations, dharnas, and black bands and black flags and the pathrao on a hotel and stuff like that. So it's so nice hearing it after 22 years that collaboration and partnerships are yielding such great results. And with very little resistance, because Badrish did mention that resistance within the world of iShare, Volvo iShare, is actually as good as nil in terms of bringing about that change. So Badrish, thanks a lot for sharing those insights. Over to our friend Sridhar there. Sudhir there, sorry, Sudhir. Sudhir, A question for you, and I'll straight away get to the secret part of it, so that you don't, digress the topic. You don't get a chance to save yourself. So, what learnings can you share that helped you be sustainable in the last 2 years as an organization, given the fact that you were hard hit by the commodity prices to an extent that most of it is known through the media to all of us. But rather than focusing more on what hit you, you can definitely focus on that as well. But focus more on how did you actually come out of it in terms of sustaining throughout those 2 years.
So thanks for the question. And I think first of all, started off saying how did we manage our supply chain and how did we manage commodity inflation. I think trying to manage the supply, we just survived the cost. Our margins actually show that. So we just tried to manage the supplies and survive the costs. So we are still trying to survive the cost because inflation is still not behind us. But one thing which I feel that all of us, and not just people sitting here, but all of you sitting out there, I think each one of us has learned how to do more with less. Be it our personal lives or be it our professional lives and our small businesses, big businesses, large businesses, our home, the way we run our home. All of us have learned that we probably need less to do more. We don't need more to do more. And I think that has been the fundamental change which I see, which has come in us as an individual and also as companies. Specifically talking of my company as Ashok Leyland, I think I don't think there is any secret that anything we did differently. I think all of us tried to do the same thing, which is just get back to the basics. And when it comes to the basics, it is trying to question each and every cost element that you have, trying to unlock each and every knot or untie each and every knot which is there in your supply chain. And sometimes it could be as simple as, if a part is going from A to B and B to C, is there a way we can cut that B and then go directly from A to C? It seems very simple now, but maybe it was not seen that way before. But the last 2 years have taught us to see it that way. A lot of attention to details in all aspects of the business, especially in the supply chain area, even in the manufacturing area. One thing which we did and which I feel good about is that a lot of times during this period, you tend to increase insourcing because there could be components which, while you're buying from outside, as well as you can make them in-house. And there's a tendency when the chips are down and your own capacity utilizations are very low, you tend to get those parts back inside. I think what we try to do is avoid it. Because what it would have meant is that the suppliers who were actually doing those parts for us, they would have probably closed down. And that would have been a big disaster. So I think that's one area where I think we did the right thing, which is not trying to lower just our cost, but also help the partners in that case. Second, I think Badrish mentioned about having an open and transparent discussions. I think we also tried to have similar kind of discussions with our partners. It's very clear that there is no way the entire commodity cost could be passed on to our customers, because our customers themselves were suffering in terms of realization of the rentals. The truck rentals were down, they're still down, they're also suffering from all kinds of inflation, be it manpower inflation, diesel inflation. So I think what we tried to do is show to our suppliers that look, our customers are suffering from these kind of margin compressions, or they're not able to even make money. So in that case, for them to offer us a price increase to our product, their ability is limited. In some cases, it is not existent at all. And therefore, as a partner, I think we have to share the burden. Because ultimately what would happen is if you don't share the burden, clearly we cannot sustain those losses for a long time. And what it would mean is that we will not be able to offer the products to our customers. So I think with some of them, we had these very, very open and transparent discussions. Some of them are sitting here, so I hope they will remember those. And I must say that to a large extent, most of them collaborated. And I'm really thankful for that, because it's not easy to cut your own margin and trying to share that with the customer. It's not easy. But at the same time, the willingness to see the longer term picture, see the longer term horizon, that yes, we will somehow overcome this current period and then see better days ahead. What I'm happy to say that since last 6 months or so, the CV industry seems to have turned the corner. But again, the uncertainties are always there. No one thought about the war will come and hit us, but it has come and hit us. Despite that, the volumes are building up. The hope is that the CV industry will continue to grow for at least next 3-4 years. And if that's the case, I think one important learning again, and which I'm trying to preach to my team as well as to all my partners, is that don't forget the days when we were actually struggling. Because I think it is time that we have a paranoid kind of a focus on cost. We should be paranoid about cost cutting. If we are not, the survival someday or the other will be at stake. Also, another reason why we have to have a paranoid focus on cost is, see, we are in an industry which is, at this point of time, we are in a mature industry. But we need to invest in newer and newer technologies to stay ahead. You have all kinds of alternate fuels, all kinds of electrification, hydrogen, all kinds of regulatory environments, regulatory changes. All this requires investments. And our current mature business has to fund those investments. So unless we cut our costs to fund those investments, the survival is at stake for all of us. Last but not the least, I think there are a big range of startups who are already in the, trying to compete in our industry in a different way. Raising capital for them is very easy. The market is flush with capital from all kinds, from the entire world. And therefore, it is more imperative on companies like ourselves and the matured suppliers that relentless focus on cost and internal cash generation remains and sustains. So those are the few things that I would like to share.
Thank you, Sudhir. Thanks for those insights. And they were real good secrets that you shared right there. I think we all talk about collaboration, but very seldom do we actually end up doing it. What I also appreciated about your statement and that of Badrish earlier is that COVID acted like a catalyst. Yeah, so the rigor that was missing, and you can have another synonym for that, the intent. Yeah. Because you always had that mandate coming from the top, saying, hey, do whatever is required to make the business more profitable. At that point of time, it's profitable. Then the word changed to sustainable, right? So, having said that, and I will come back to all of you with one common question around regulation. And that will probably be our closing remarks in terms of how regulation has impacted during, again, those COVID times, positively, negatively, both. But before that, I would like to ask my friend Milind over there, who represents FM Logistics, that how did FM Logistics deal with the supply chain constraints in the segment of CV for its customers and for the industry of CV as well?
Thank you. So first, it was wonderful to hear words like collaboration and trust on this forum. Normally, when we meet customers in their meeting rooms, it is cost kam kaise karoge, you know? So rate kam kaise karoge. That is normally how it is. But nevertheless, this is a good approach and a good start. People brought up the topic of visibility and constraints in the supply chain. When we began, we are in the service provider industry, right? So this is different from the rest of the panelists. Is one thing I'd like the audience to keep in mind. Having said that, going back a few years when we decided to start our transportation vertical, the question we tried to answer, and which all of us do, like Porter did, I'm sure, was how will we differentiate ourselves from everyone else? How are we going to be different from everyone else? We had some brainstorming sessions in-house. We spoke to customers, and two things came out. One was visibility in the transportation industry, and second was handling of exceptions. So it's not just visibility, it's not just knowing where your truck is. It is also knowing what would you do if something goes wrong. That is what the customer always wants to know. If things are fine, it's good. So to answer this, what we did was we set up something called a process control center. It is also often referred to as a control tower. And someone was referring to inbound logistics here, the importance of inbound logistics, strategic inventory, and all that. So we set up a control tower, which is a 24/7 operation. which starts, and I'm talking of on the ground, right? I'm not talking of cabins here. It starts with hiring of a vehicle for moving inventories. So we took simple steps. Each of us wants to know the what and why of what we do, right? Or how and why. It is the same with the truck driver, right? It is important to tell him what he's doing and why he's doing it. So we started with a simple process of driver briefing. First, we began with safety. We told him that it is important that he is safe on the road, he wears his mask during COVID times, drive safely, there's someone waiting back at home for him. In the previous session, we talked about safety. So this we impinge on his mind to begin with. That is one. Two, we look at his documents because often small mistakes in documents in the transportation industry leads to big consequences. That is second. Third, we do online tracking for 100% of our vehicles. This is part of our process. This is not an exception. And then we fix 2 times in the day when we will talk to the driver. Okay, this is one part. We set up a control tower for some of our inbound customers for whom this inbound inventory is very critical, which tracks the vehicle right from arriving at the supplier end for loading to getting loaded, the en route live tracking, and then the reaching of the vehicle at the destination. The part that we focus on is if something goes wrong, what do we do? The approach is to be proactive rather than reactive. And this continues to help us even now, post-COVID times. So this was one constraint that we faced and how we responded to that constraint. On this forum, while we talk of constraints as simple as this, it is also important to bring up a couple of other constraints, right? It should leave us with some questions. So we talk of bringing costs out of the supply chain, and one way of bringing costs out is rate kitna kam karoge, that's one way. The other is looking deeply into the supply chain, and I want to bring up a few points. And these points are very grassroots, but I believe in something called the broken windows theory, which says address simple things first. When we spoke earlier, the journey ends with something called POD. If any one of you from the transport industry have heard of this term, it is proof of delivery. So you send a consignment note with your truck, and then it is supposed to come back, the hard copy of the POD. And we, as supply chain service providers or as transporters, have to use this hard copy, and maybe Porter will find this relevant, have to use this hard copy of the POD to invoice to our customers. Now I'll bring in a couple of statistics, okay? Transportation, road transportation accounts for about 3.6% of India's GDP. This is a huge number. This is lakhs of crores of rupees we are talking about, right? Now imagine a truck, journey of a truck. You hire a truck, it reaches the destination in 5-7 days, and then you wait for this POD to come back in this digital era, right? It takes 15, 20, 25 days, and then we invoice a customer. So lakhs of crores result in thousands of crores of rupees waiting in thin air for a piece of paper to come back. I want to use this forum to raise this question. When we talk of pulling money out of a supply chain or putting cash back into the supply chain, isn't this one archaic way of doing business that has been holding on for so long for reasons that I really don't know whether any one of us have really thought through on these reasons? You know? So I'm not going to give answers here. I think it is important all of us take this question back home. You'll be surprised during COVID times, all our customers accepted soft copies of POD. You know, it is acceptable, it is doable. And I'm talking of the economy here and thousands of crores. It is not a simple and easy answer. So that is one point I wanted to raise. And I would like all of you to keep this in mind and raise it in various forums that you would go to, government forums, organizations, and take this ahead, please. Because I believe information should be actionable. That's one. Now I'll bring in another small point. It's small as far as industry is concerned, but big for us as service providers. We'll begin with a few statistics. If you look at the industry, the truck ownership pattern in India, it is quite interesting. 75% of truck owners own 2 to 4 vehicles, 2 to 4 trucks. About 15% of truck owners own 5 to 20 trucks. And about 10%, the remaining, own more than 20 trucks. So it is a very spread across industry, or fragmented is the right word. It is a fragmented industry, right? And these 75% depend on the trucks for their sustenance, okay? Keep this as one point in mind. The other statistics, which is interesting, and if you talk to transporters, you'll find out, 40% of the life of a truck is wasted in idling. It is on the road idling, it does nothing. Where does it idle? Okay. This we call detention. आपने भी सुना होगा. So it is either idling at the loading point, it is idling at the unloading point because stocks have been pushed, there's no space, you all know this. Or today it is also idling at entry points to cities. All cities today have 6 to 7 hour restrictions where trucks are not allowed to come in. So imagine the 75% of truck owners who own 2 to 4 trucks, which are dependent on for sustenance. 40% of the time of their asset is wasted just hanging around. Add to this another fact, okay? India has roughly 8 million trucks, active trucks on the roads, and about 5.5 million drivers. This shoots a question. We are terribly short of drivers. This is increasing as we go ahead. So 28% of trucks on the road do not have drivers. They're just waiting for want of drivers, right? All of us, when we talk of logistics, when we talk of goods, finally there has to be a driver and a truck to deliver the cargo to the destination, right? Now, what is the point here? The point is, not only are trucks short of drivers, but the number of people opting to be drivers is reducing, right? Now, detention is one big waste of time, but I'll not get into that because industry functions on its own logic, and it is often tough to address all points, so we'll not get there. But let's look at the simple thing. If we need more people to become drivers, or at least not run away from becoming drivers, and that is not important as a social consequence or as a social message, but for us as business owners, right? As a business, if we want people to run our trucks for us, it is important that we provide basic facilities to these drivers. Imagine there's this guy on the road driving these trucks. He sleeps under the truck, he cooks under the truck, he eats under the truck, right? So there's this guy hanging around, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to do with his time, not knowing where to wait. And these are basics which can be done. This is in our hands. All of us as industry leaders, when we go back and look at our P&Ls, I would request all of us to also keep this in mind so that this industry continues supplying for our supply chains. Because if you would remember, during COVID times, it was the drivers who kept running. They went through various challenges and it was the transporters who kept running. So I believe it is important for us to take these questions back home, discuss this in various forums, and if possible, act on them so that the industry changes for the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Milind. I think we are running short of time, but Milind touched base upon very, very critical points, right, from detention to everything. This is a commercial vehicle forum, right? And imagine what would happen if you would have less trucks getting sold, lesser and lesser, because you would not want, a lot of drivers would not want to drive trucks, and therefore unsold inventory, and then what is going to happen to the country? We as a race, Indian race, we have alternatives to a lot of things. So my problem would probably not be his problem, and his problem would not be her problem. So we tend to believe in this, and we end up saying that, okay, I can probably take the train route, I can take the multimodal route, I may not need a truck, I can do away without it, etc., etc. Remember, we are all sitting in a commercial vehicle forum, and for sustainability of the CV industry, it is imperative that we work together, not only on the constraints which were COVID relevant, Ukraine-Russia war relevant, but also for the sustainability of the industry. With this, I would like to conclude this session and open it up for Q&A, and I would be the first one to ask the question. Yeah. My question is to Sudhir on regulatory, especially around one specific clause of diesel trucks. Some of the states have come up with this regulation that you cannot ply your diesel trucks for more than 10 years. And even for diesel cars, for that matter of fact. But let's stick to trucks at this point of time. How do you see that impacting? And we also know that the alternative is the alternative fuel, the EV, etc., etc. And what are you doing as an organization? How is this whole thing impacting?
So I think the regulation, the regulatory actions, and especially the regulatory actions related to environmental concerns, we as industry have to accept them, that they are going to be there and they are going to become more and more stringent. So as an industry, we have to prepare for them. We have to work on alternatives. I think all of us, all the manufacturers are working on all alternatives. I don't see it getting postponed or anything. We have to just get prepared for it and make sure that we are ready, because I see them, the regulatory requirements on environmental concerns, coming much faster than we think it will. So it is better to be prepared than be sorry.
Thank you, Sudhir. Questions, anybody? Please raise your hands and we'll get the mic right there. Yeah, I can see the center table right there.
And yes, this will be the last question, and the rest of the questions we can networking session for the team.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that excellent session.
No, microphone.
Hello.
Yeah, now it's good.
Yeah, thank you for that excellent session. COVID has actually been a strategic inflection point for a lot of us. We've gone ahead. My question was again about regulation. So I see that rising regulation is also leading to a little bit of supply chain shortages. So what is the greater of the two evils? I mean, because of increasing regulations, we're going to have less emissions, but we're also going to have shortage, and because of which we're also going to have poverty. So what do you think is more important, reducing poverty or the environment?
Nandini, would you want to take that?
Enforcing regulation does not necessarily lead to shortages. The ecosystem is created in such a way that the regulations are adhered to without causing shortages. So my personal belief is that I don't see any shortages, to meet the regulatory requirements, and hence there is no sort of correlation with poverty. Maybe, so would you like to take it?
Yeah, so I'll just answer that. To some extent, you're right. I think there is always going to be a transition period. People are calling that as greenflation, which is like when you transition from, let's say, non-clean technologies to clean technologies, in whichever part of the industry, not just transportation, but it could be steel, it could be power, or anything like that. There will be a period where you will see a very high or very steep increase in the traditional mode of things, be it the commodities or any power or anything. But then after that transition period, you will find that both the people as well as an economy, it has transitioned to the new way of living. So there will be a period where you will see those issues, but I think the challenge for all of us, including industry and the government, is how to manage that transition.
I hope that answers your question, and everyone else can connect with the panelists separately. And I would request you all to give a thunderous round of applause to the panelists for such an amazing session. Thank you very much.